My ex mocked my small apartment, but she didn't expect who showed up for dinner. Clara showed up at my door without warning, her designer heels clicking against the worn hallway tiles of my modest apartment building. She walked in like she owned the place, her eyes immediately scanning my living room with that familiar look of disgust I remembered too well from our marriage. "Wow, Marcus," she said with a smirk, running her manicured finger along my second-hand coffee table. "You've really downgraded, haven't you?" She laughed as she examined my hand-me-down furniture and the small kitchen visible through the open doorway. The couch was comfortable enough for me, and the dining table seated 4 people perfectly fine, but Clara saw only what was missing. Her voice dripped with false concern as she shook her head. "I mean, I knew things were tough for you after the divorce, but this is just sad." Something hardened in my chest as I watched her performance, but I kept my expression calm and invited her to sit down. Over the simple dinner I'd prepared, Clara couldn't stop bragging about her new life with her wealthy fiancé. "You should see Daniel's mansion," she gushed, cutting into her chicken with exaggerated elegance. "The kitchen alone is bigger than this entire apartment. And don't even get me started on the pool house. It's literally the size of 3 of these units combined." She gestured around my dining area dismissively. "I mean, I'm not trying to be cruel, Marcus, but living in a shoebox like this can't be healthy for your mental state." Her words cut deeper than I let show, but I'd learned to hide my reactions during our marriage. She continued describing marble countertops, walk-in closets, and a wine cellar worth more than most people's cars. Every detail was designed to make me feel small and unsuccessful. I nodded politely and kept eating, though the food had lost its taste. The comparison game was one Clara had always excelled at, and tonight she was playing to win. Clara pulled out her phone with theatrical flair, typing a message with perfectly manicured nails. "I'm texting Daniel to come pick me up," she announced, as if I should be honored by this information. "He's probably wondering why I'm taking so long in this neighborhood anyway." She looked up from her screen with fake surprise. "Oh, but I don't want to interrupt your evening plans. Though I can't imagine what you'd be doing here on a Friday night." I took a sip of water and calmly mentioned that I actually had dinner plans too. The statement hung in the air for a moment before Clara burst into genuine laughter. "Dinner plans? Here?" she said, looking around my small apartment again. "Marcus, seriously, who would come here willingly? I mean, besides the pizza delivery guy." Her laughter echoed off the walls, and I could see she found the idea genuinely amusing. Little did she know that everything was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Just as Clara finished wiping tears of laughter from her eyes, a firm knock echoed through my apartment. The sound made her pause mid-giggle, and she looked toward the door with curiosity. "That's probably Daniel," she said confidently, checking her phone. "Though he's earlier than expected." She stood up and smoothed her dress, preparing to make her grand exit with her wealthy fiancé. I remained seated, finishing my glass of water with deliberate calm. "Actually," I said quietly, setting down my glass, "that's my guest." Clara's expression shifted from amusement to confusion, then back to mockery. "Your guest?" she repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Right? Let me guess. Your landlord coming to collect rent." She smirked at her own joke, clearly expecting me to be embarrassed by whoever was at the door. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, and Clara gestured toward the entrance. "Well, don't keep your guest waiting, Marcus. This should be entertaining." I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and reached for the handle, knowing that Clara's world was about to shatter completely. I opened the door to reveal Daniel standing in the hallway, holding a beautiful bouquet of flowers and a bottle of expensive wine. Clara's jaw dropped as her fiancé stepped into my apartment, but not to pick her up. He was here to see me. "Marcus," Daniel said warmly, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Thank you so much for having me over. I brought these for you." He handed me the flowers and wine, completely ignoring Clara's stunned expression. She stood frozen in the middle of my living room, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Daniel?" she finally managed to whisper. "What are you doing here?" He turned to acknowledge her with surprise, as if he'd just noticed her presence. "Clara? What a coincidence. I didn't expect to see you here." The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. Clara, who had been the queen of condescension just moments before, was now the one looking completely lost and confused. She stared back and forth between Daniel and me, trying to process what was happening. Daniel settled into my modest dining room as if it were the most natural thing in the world, ignoring Clara's bewildered stares. "Marcus, I can't thank you enough for what you did for my company," he said, loosening his tie and getting comfortable. "The restructuring plan you developed saved us millions. Your analysis was brilliant. You saw problems that our entire board of directors missed." Clara's eyes widened as she slowly sank back into her chair, processing this information. "You were the consultant who turned everything around," Daniel continued. "I know you wanted to keep it confidential, but your work was extraordinary." I poured wine for both of us while Clara sat in stunned silence. Her brain was clearly trying to reconcile the image of her failed ex-husband with this praise from one of the city's most successful businessmen. Daniel raised his glass toward me. "To the man who saved my company and taught me that real intelligence doesn't always come with fancy offices." The toast echoed through my small apartment, but it felt more powerful than any celebration in a mansion. As Daniel and I discussed business over dinner, Clara's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. My tiny apartment suddenly felt like the center of important conversations and major decisions. Daniel praised my analytical skills, my integrity, and my ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. "Marcus has this incredible talent for understanding complex systems," he explained, as if Clara weren't sitting right there. "He could have demanded any price for his consulting work, but he was more interested in doing the right thing." Clara tried to interject several times, but found herself oddly silenced by the genuine respect in Daniel's voice. She'd spent years telling everyone that I was lazy, unmotivated, and destined for failure. Yet here was her wealthy fiancé treating me like a valued advisor and trusted friend. The hand-me-down furniture didn't seem shabby anymore. It seemed authentic. The small space didn't feel cramped. It felt intimate and real. Everything Clara had mocked was being reframed as something genuine and valuable. Clara finally found her voice, but it came out shrill and desperate. "Wait, wait, wait," she interrupted, waving her hands frantically. "This is ridiculous. Marcus is broke. He's a complete failure who couldn't even keep our marriage together or maintain a decent standard of living." She gestured wildly around the apartment. "Look at this place. Look at how he lives. He's obviously lying to you about his qualifications." Daniel's expression grew cold as he watched Clara's outburst. He set down his wine glass and looked at her with disappointment. "Clara, you clearly don't know Marcus very well," he said firmly. "He turned down a 7-figure offer to join my company full-time because he values his independence more than money." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Clara's face went pale as she realized that I hadn't failed at all. I had made deliberate choices that she'd never understood. Daniel continued, "He chose freedom over greed, which is exactly the kind of character I respect in business partners." Daniel leaned forward, his excitement growing as he revealed more information. "Actually, Marcus, that's part of why I wanted to have dinner tonight. I've been thinking about our conversation last week, and I'd like to invest in your new consulting venture." Clara's head snapped toward me so fast I thought she might get whiplash. "New venture?" she whispered. Daniel nodded enthusiastically. "Marcus is launching his own firm, specializing in corporate restructuring and ethical business practices. I want to be his first major investor." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my small dining table. "We're talking about a substantial investment that could revolutionize how companies approach organizational change." Clara stared at the documents with growing horror, realizing that not only was I financially stable, but I was actually thriving in ways she'd never imagined. Her entire narrative about my failure was collapsing before her eyes. The man she'd left for being unsuccessful was apparently successful enough to attract investment from her own fiancé. Clara's demeanor changed instantly, like a switch had been flipped. The mocking laughter disappeared, replaced by forced smiles and suddenly sweet compliments. "Oh, Marcus," she said in a voice dripping with fake warmth. "I always knew you had potential. Remember how I used to encourage your ideas?" She reached across the table as if to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I mean, I may have been frustrated sometimes, but that was only because I believed in you so much. Daniel watched this performance with growing suspicion, his eyes narrowing as he observed Clara's dramatic personality change. "You know," she continued desperately, "maybe we were too hasty about the divorce. We made such a good team when we worked together." Her voice became increasingly frantic as she tried to rewrite our history. "I was just going through a difficult time, but I've always supported your dreams." Daniel's expression hardened as he witnessed this manipulative display. He was clearly seeing a side of Clara that she'd hidden from him, and he didn't like what he was discovering about his fiancée's character. I excused myself quietly and walked to my bedroom, returning with a thick folder that I'd kept hidden for months. Clara's eyes widened with fear as I placed it on the table between us. "Since we're having such an honest conversation," I said calmly, opening the folder to reveal meticulous records, "I think Daniel should know the truth about our marriage and divorce." Inside were printed emails, bank statements, text message screenshots, and documentation of Clara's secret schemes. These are records of how Clara systematically tried to drain our joint savings account, hide assets, and even attempted to sabotage my business relationships during our divorce proceedings. Daniel leaned forward, studying the evidence with the same analytical mind that had made him successful in business. Clara's face went from pale to completely white as she recognized her own words and actions documented in black and white. "I kept quiet during the divorce because I wanted it to end peacefully," I continued. "But I don't need to protect her reputation anymore." The evidence was damning, and Clara knew it. Daniel read through the documents with growing disbelief and anger. Bank transfer records showed Clara moving money to secret accounts. Email chains revealed her coordination with her lawyer to hide valuable assets. Text messages displayed her bragging to friends about taking me for everything I was worth. "Clara," Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet, "you told me that Marcus was an irresponsible husband who left you with nothing but debt." Clara tried to interrupt, but Daniel held up his hand for silence. "According to these documents, you were the one who created the financial problems and then blamed him for them." She began pleading, trying to explain away the evidence, but each excuse sounded weaker than the last. "I kept quiet then because I hoped you'd find happiness," I said, looking directly at Clara. "But I documented everything because I knew your character better than anyone." Daniel carefully organized the papers back into the folder, his businessman's mind processing the implications. Clara realized that her web of lies was unraveling faster than she could weave new ones. Daniel turned to face Clara fully, his expression a mixture of disappointment and anger. "You've been lying to me about everything," he said, his voice controlled but furious. "You painted Marcus as a lazy failure who ruined your marriage, but these documents prove you were the one causing problems." Clara tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away. "You told me he was financially irresponsible, but you're the one who was stealing and hiding money." Her desperate explanations fell on deaf ears as Daniel connected the dots between her lies about me and what that meant about their relationship. "If you could deceive me this thoroughly about your ex-husband," he continued, "what else have you lied about?" Clara's carefully constructed new life was crumbling as Daniel realized he'd been manipulated and used. She targeted him not for love, but for his wealth and status, just as she tried to exploit me during our marriage. The evidence spread across my small dining table represented years of manipulation that could no longer be hidden or explained away. Even when she was screaming and attacking your character, I simply nodded and began clearing the dinner plates, as if nothing unusual had happened. Daniel and I spent the rest of the evening discussing business plans and investment strategies, as if Clara's meltdown had been just a minor interruption. "To new partnerships," Daniel said, raising his wine glass again, "built on honesty and mutual respect." We talked about market opportunities, ethical business practices, and the consulting firm I was planning to launch. The conversation flowed naturally, two professionals discussing shared interests and values. "You know," Daniel said as the evening wound down, "Clara leaving might be the best thing that could have happened to both of us tonight." He gathered his things and shook my hand firmly at the door. "I'll have my lawyers draw up the investment documents next week. This is going to be the beginning of something significant." After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment, processing everything that had happened. Clara's world was about to collapse in ways she couldn't yet imagine, but I felt only peace. The truth had finally come to light, and justice was beginning to unfold naturally. The next morning brought swift consequences for Clara's lies and manipulation. Daniel wasted no time calling off their engagement, and word spread quickly through their social circle. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing with messages from mutual friends who had heard about the dramatic revelations. Clara found herself suddenly isolated, with former friends questioning everything she'd told them about our marriage and her relationship with Daniel. The expensive ring was returned, the wedding venue was canceled, and Clara's dreams of a wealthy lifestyle evaporated overnight. Her friends who had once admired her for trading up from me to Daniel were now mocking her for losing both relationships through her own deception. Social media buzzed with whispered conversations about her lies and manipulation. The woman who had built her identity around status and appearances was now facing public humiliation and rejection. Within 24 hours, Clara had gone from being envied to being pitied, and she had no one to blame but herself for the dramatic reversal of fortune. 3 days later, Clara appeared at my door again, but this time there was no arrogance or mockery in her demeanor. She looked exhausted and desperate, her designer clothes wrinkled and her makeup smudged. "Marcus, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you. I've made terrible mistakes, and I want to make things right." I let her in but remained standing while she collapsed onto my couch. "I was wrong about everything," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I was angry and hurt after our divorce, and I said things that weren't true. I sabotaged your reputation and tried to turn people against you." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Please, can you forgive me? Can we try to work things out?" I listened silently as she poured out apologies and excuses, but her words felt hollow after years of manipulation and recent betrayal. Finally, I spoke quietly. "You laughed at my home and my life. You mocked everything I built and tried to destroy everything I valued. Now you have no home and no life to speak of." The truth of those words hit her like a physical blow. Clara's desperation turned to rage when she realized her apologies weren't working. She launched a vicious campaign against me on social media, posting angry rants about how I had manipulated Daniel and stolen her fiancé through lies and deception. Her posts painted me as a vindictive ex-husband who couldn't accept her happiness and had conspired to destroy her relationship. But her emotional outbursts only made her look more unhinged and desperate. I responded by calmly sharing screenshots of her own messages and emails, letting her words speak for themselves. The contrast was stark, her hysterical accusations versus my documented evidence. People began commenting with support for my dignity and composure in the face of her attacks. "This man has class," read one comment. "He's letting the facts speak instead of getting into a mud fight." Clara's strategy backfired completely as public opinion turned against her dramatic attempts to rewrite history. The more frantically she posted, the more sympathy I received from people who could see through her manipulation tactics. The story took on a life of its own across social media platforms. Video clips of my calm demeanor and Clara's explosive tantrums were shared thousands of times, with people praising my restraint and dignity. Comments poured in calling me the man who got the ultimate revenge without raising his voice, and celebrating my quiet strength in the face of adversity. The hashtag quiet victory began trending as people shared their own stories of overcoming toxic relationships through patience and integrity rather than drama and confrontation. My story became a symbol of how authentic success and genuine character ultimately triumph over manipulation and superficiality. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as an inspiring tale of resilience and truth prevailing over deception. Interviews requests flooded in, though I declined most of them, preferring to let my actions speak for themselves. Clara, meanwhile, found herself becoming an internet cautionary tale about the consequences of manipulation and greed. The viral attention brought validation I hadn't expected, but more importantly, it brought opportunities for my consulting business that I had never imagined possible. As Clara's online meltdown continued, Daniel's family lawyers discovered something that changed everything. The evidence I had provided led them to uncover a pattern of financial fraud that went far beyond our marriage. Clara had been systematically deceiving not just me and Daniel, but had attempted to manipulate Daniel's family trust and business assets through forged documents and false claims. The lawyers found evidence of identity theft, fraudulent loan applications, and attempts to access accounts that didn't belong to her. What had started as a personal betrayal was now a criminal matter involving multiple victims and substantial financial losses. Daniel's family filed formal charges against Clara for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. The legal documents I had carefully maintained during our divorce became crucial evidence in a much larger case. Clara suddenly found herself facing not just social embarrassment, but serious criminal charges that could result in jail time. The woman who had mocked my modest apartment was now looking at the possibility of trading her freedom for a prison cell. The courtroom was packed when Clara's case went to trial, with many of our mutual friends and business associates attending to witness the final chapter of her downfall. My meticulously kept records proved invaluable to the prosecution's case, demonstrating a clear pattern of deceptive behavior that supported the more serious criminal charges. Clara's expensive lawyers tried to paint her as a victim of circumstances, but the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Bank records, forged signatures, fraudulent applications, and recorded conversations painted a picture of systematic criminal behavior. When I testified, I stuck to the facts, presenting evidence calmly and professionally without emotional commentary or personal attacks. The judge praised the thoroughness of my documentation, noting that my records had probably prevented additional victims from being defrauded. Clara was found guilty on multiple counts and sentenced to prison time, plus restitution payments that would drain whatever assets she had left. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one final time, but I felt only pity for what she had brought upon herself. The day after Clara's sentencing, Daniel called a press conference to announce our new business partnership officially. Standing beside him in front of reporters and photographers, I felt the surreal nature of how dramatically my life had changed. Marcus represents everything we value in business ethics and professional integrity, Daniel told the assembled media. Our partnership will focus on helping companies build sustainable, ethical practices while achieving genuine success. Cameras flashed as we signed documents and shook hands, marking the beginning of a venture that promised to be both profitable and meaningful. Meanwhile, across town, Clara was photographed leaving the courthouse in disgrace, her legal troubles now public record and her reputation permanently destroyed. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While she faced prison and financial ruin, I was launching a new chapter of professional success built on honesty and hard work. The media coverage showed the dramatic reversal of fortune that had taken place over just a few months. From her mocking my small apartment to her losing everything while I gained respect and opportunity. 6 months later, I moved into a beautiful new apartment. Not a mansion like Clara had always craved, but a warm, comfortable home that I had designed and chosen myself. The space reflected my values. Functional, elegant, and genuine rather than ostentatious or impressive for its own sake. I hosted friends and business associates regularly, creating the kind of authentic community that Clara had never understood or valued. My consulting firm was thriving, with clients seeking not just business advice but ethical guidance in corporate decision-making. The success felt different from anything I had experienced before. It was based on respect earned rather than money accumulated, relationships built rather than status achieved. I decorated the apartment with art from local artists, books that I actually read, and furniture that prioritized comfort over appearance. Every evening, I sat in my living room and appreciated the peace that came from living authentically, free from the drama and manipulation that had characterized my marriage to Clara. This was what real success looked like: contentment, purpose, and genuine connection with others. At a mutual friend's gathering several months later, I encountered Clara for the first time since the trial. She was serving community service as part of her sentence, working at a local charity event that our friend had organized. The confident, mocking woman who had sneered at my apartment was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely humbled by her experiences. People at the party treated her with polite distance, while they approached me with warmth and respect, asking about my business and congratulating me on my success. The role reversal was complete, but I felt no need to gloat or make comments about her situation. When our eyes met across the room, I simply nodded politely and continued my conversation with a potential new client. Clara watched from afar as people celebrated my achievements and sought my advice, seeing firsthand how much my life had improved since her departure. The evening was a perfect illustration of how authentic success and genuine relationships create lasting happiness, while manipulation and greed lead only to isolation and regret. As I locked the door of my comfortable apartment that night, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me to this moment. Clara had mocked my small apartment, dismissing it as evidence of my failure and inadequacy. She had laughed at my furniture, my lifestyle, and my choices, never understanding that I was building something money couldn't buy. In this home, I had created a foundation of respect, peace, and authentic relationships that no amount of wealth could provide. The apartment where she had humiliated me had become the launching pad for a success story that went far beyond financial gain. I had built a business based on integrity, formed partnerships founded on mutual respect, and created a life aligned with my values. Clara had lost everything in her pursuit of status and superficial success, while I had gained everything by staying true to myself and treating others with dignity. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I smiled at the final irony. She had mocked my small apartment, but in this modest home, I had built something far more valuable than any mansion, a life worth living.